Hello, everyone. My name is Leslie Brill. I'm president of the Bronx River Sound Shore Audubon Society, chapter of the National Audubon Society. And we are thrilled and honored this evening to have Tina Morris as our speaker, doing a program on her personal role in the reintroduction of bald eagles when they were close to extinction. Um, I'm going to read Tina's bio before I turn things over to her. Tina Morris completed her graduate work in ornithology and wildlife biology at Cornell in 1978.
In service of this nation, and he thinks that threats and intimidation are going to get me to back.
Okay, please put yourselves on mute. I don't do mute all because I end up muting the speaker. Okay, starting over again. Tina Morris completed her graduate work in ornithology and wildlife biology at Cornell in 1978, writing her thesis on the adaptations of hacking techniques to reintroduce bald eagles. Following her studies at Cornell, she worked for the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Nature Conservancy for several years, focusing on endangered species and critical habitat conservation before embarking on a 23-year career teaching English and biology. Since her retirement in 2020, she has devoted her time to her own writing, especially creative nonfiction with a science or nature focus. 30 years ago, with 4 children in tow, Tina and her husband bought a farm in northern Massachusetts, which they manage as a wildlife sanctuary promoting biodiversity and habitat protection for species in decline. So with that, I'm going to turn things over to Tina for Return to the Sky, Reintroduction of Bald Eagles. Feel free to share your screen whenever you're ready, Tina, and thanks for being here.
Okay, well, thank you, Leslie. I appreciate the introduction. I will try to share my screen right now, and we'll hope for the best.
Tina, I wanted to say hi just before we start. It's Doug.
Hi, Doug. Nice to see you.
Yes.
We talked many times on the phone, but we never actually got to see each other. So this is a pleasure.
Well, I got you to sign your book at Eagle Fest last year,
Oh, okay. Well, you can
but
see
that's the
what
only
state
time.
I was in at that point. But thank you. And thank you for having me here. This is a wonderful invitation, especially since I was from Long Island. That's where I grew up, and so many of the places that you guys go birding are very familiar to me. I spent many a day on Jones's Beach in January, as well as in the summer. So it makes me go back in time. Um, it is a treat to be able to address, now this is a big mouthful for me, the Bronx River South Sound Shore Audubon Society tonight, about my book, Return to the Sky, which is the story of the bald eagles I was trying to save 50 years ago. As we approach the project's anniversary in July, at the same time the country is celebrating its 250th birthday, it is fitting that we're celebrating the eagles' comeback in lower Westchester County along the Hudson River and throughout the state of New York. Tonight, I will be focusing on the reintroduction project itself. If you read the book, you can find out how my life was changed by the program. But for now, the 7 eaglets will take center stage. And just like their spectacular relatives who now range throughout the Northeast, they do this very well. The 1970s were a time of magic in bird conservation, and this talk is dedicated to those who made it happen. It is also a positive story, which we all probably need to hear today in light of the recent reports of bird decline. There's another reason why it is an honor to speak to you tonight. As some of you might know, on Christmas Eve of 2024, President Biden signed a bill designating the bald eagle our national bird. Many of us, including me, had thought it was already our national bird. But a dedicated supporter of the National Eagle Center in Wabasha, Minnesota, Preston Cook, discovered the government had never officially named it as such. With the help of Amy Klobuchar, the senator from Minnesota, he was able to convince both houses of Congress, which, as you know, says a lot, to pass legislation which made it to the president's desk just before he was to leave office. We can now accurately refer to the eagle as the nation's bird and have Preston Cook to thank for this effort. The saga of the bald eagle's return was inextricably tied to that of the peregrine falcon. Without its smaller and faster friend to set the pace, the success of the Eagle Project might not have been so auspicious. The raptor biologists who were responsible for the reintroduction of the peregrine in 1973 became the central force behind the restoration of the eagle 3 years later. The story of the eagle and peregrine began in Ithaca in central New York State, home to Cornell University, which some of you may know. Perched on the southern end of Cayuga Lake, one of the Finger Lakes, also so named for their long and skinny shapes, Cornell was known for its world-renowned laboratory of ornithology. By the 1970s, it had also become the epicenter for raptor reintroductions. We need to back up a decade, however, to the seminal event that started everything. In 1962, a marine biologist named Rachel Carson wrote Silent Spring, the book that sounded the alarm about the lethal effects of the pesticide DDT. At the time, few biologists paid attention to Carson, partly because of her doomsday predictions and partly because of her gender. Women were scarce in science at the time, which made it easy for the scientific community to dismiss her. It was her findings about DDT, a long-lasting pesticide used to combat malaria during World War II, that made Carson a main character in the bald eagle story. She discovered that DDT wasn't just killing the mosquitoes it was meant to control, but was breaking down into its metabolite DDE, which was absorbed by the algae, fish, and other aquatic organisms consumed by birds. Once ingested, DDE interfered with the calcium metabolism of the bird's eggs, resulting in thinner shells and breakage as soon as they tried to incubate them. Although all birds were being affected, it was the ones most at risk were those at the top of the food chain, the ospreys, pelicans, and bald eagles, who eat fish, and the peregrine falcons, who eat smaller birds, who were in turn eating insects, seeds, and other food contaminated by the poison. Through a process called biomagnification, the pesticide was consumed by species at each trophic level. Its concentration increased with every step up the food chain until its final and top destination, the predators. Sadly, Rachel Carson died of cancer at the age of 56, only 2 years after her book was published, but her findings had been corroborated at the U.S. Geological Survey's Patuxent Wildlife Research Center in Maryland. The bird world was shocked by the truth that explained the decline of so many of their beloved species. Carson's cause was taken up by a group of people with personal interests in the raptors affected by DDT, particularly peregrine falcons. In 1965, led by a falconer named Joe Hickey, a professor at the University of Wisconsin, a conference was held in Madison to discuss the problem. At that meeting, the Raptor Research Foundation was born. The 1970s became the age of enlightenment as the federal government took up the cause of environmental degradation. Under Richard Nixon, whose administration, unbeknownst to many, had a strong commitment to the environment, legislation began to be passed to curb our decline. In 1970, Joe Hickey organized a second meeting in Madison, this time to call for the ban of DDT. In December of that year, the EPA was established to be the watchdog for clean air and water. Although DDT wasn't officially banned until 1972, the race was on to save the birds. Preparing the stage further to restore species like the peregrine and eagle was the passage of the Endangered Species Act in 1973, protecting not only the species, but also their habitat. Let me introduce the fathers of falconry. 3 men were most instrumental in addressing the plight of peregrines. Tom Cade was a falconer and ornithology professor at Syracuse University before he came to Cornell. Heinz Meng was mastering the art of captive breeding of falcons at SUNY New Paltz in New York, and of course, Joe Hickey. Although the falconry world was close-knit and everyone helped each other as they considered how to save the peregrine, it was Tom Cade who established the program that would bring it back. He moved from Syracuse to Cornell with a stipulation that he could house a captive breeding facility in Ithaca. Because there were no peregrines left in the Northeast, captive breeding of subspecies from other regions was vital. Dr. Cade created a facility known to the Cornell community as the Hawk Barn, right down the road from the Lab of Ornithology. The barn was divided into flight cages with nesting ledges to resemble the peregrine's natural eyries. Here, the art of artificial insemination was mastered, although excited male falcons forced their handlers to wear some self-defense equipment, like this modified helmet with a lip around it, to catch the semen while protecting their heads. The peregrine program used hacking, a training technique borrowed from falconry, whereby young birds are raised and released without parents. Sometimes these young falcons can be bred in captivity or taken from the nest at a young age. In the latter case, the birds have imprinted or identified with their parents before they're released, so they will mature and live as members of their species. The peregrine falcon program placed young falcons into hacking boxes, where they were fed and protected by human attendants, who stayed out of sight as much as possible until they were ready to fly and catch food on their own. The hack boxes were placed in areas that most closely replicated peregrine's natural habitats, such as cliffsides or ledges, towers, and later bridges, when the releases moved into cities in order to minimize the predation on young falcons by animals like great horned owls and raccoons. The peregrine releases, begun in 1973, served as the model for the Bald Eagle Project. Having witnessed the success of the peregrine program, New York State's Department of Environmental Conservation foresaw the year 1976 as an ideal time to bring the eagle back from the brink of extinction. By then, DDT had decimated its populations in all states of the Northeast, except for a few breeding pairs left in Maine. Patriotic fever was running high, and nobody could imagine celebrating the bicentennial without what they believed to be at the time their national bird. After its ban in 1972, DDT levels detected in fish declined precipitously. By the mid-1970s, the bald eagle's former habitat had become clean enough to receive birds again. Although almost gone from the sky, the eagle's image was ubiquitous, appearing on our currency, on sports team logos, and of course on our national seal, despite Ben Franklin's disdain for the eagle, which he considered a bad moral character, supposedly because of its scavenger nature. The turkey and other contenders didn't stand a chance against the grandeur of the bald eagle when our forefathers had to select a symbol of freedom, majesty, and power to represent the newly independent USA. By 1976, in the lower 48 states, eagles had been reduced to 417 pairs, a number too low to sustain the species. According to the terms of the Endangered Species Act, the federal government controlled the bald eagle, so New York needed permission from the Department of the Interior to launch a reintroduction program. DEC's proposal to release eagles was denied due to the state agency not having any raptor biologists on staff who could lead it. Enter Tom Cade and his young and inexperienced wannabe graduate student, me. I had arrived at Cornell to pursue my dream to work with Dr. Cade and to save birds of prey. But when he told me I needed a funded program to be accepted as one of his students, my dream started to plummet. Then, by pure serendipity, I had a chance meeting with the two Fish and Wildlife administrators in Washington in charge of the defunct eagle proposal, and things took a sudden turn. They asked Tom Cade to head the program for eagles, excuse me, due to his expertise with reintroducing peregrines. If I would be willing to work with the eagles, Dr. Cade said, he would agree to supervise the project, and the eagle program would be possible. A deal was made and the project began, officially in June 1976, but the ground began to be laid the previous fall. The first order of business was to find a suitable site in New York from which to reintroduce the birds. Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge near Seneca Falls, at the northern end of Cayuga Lake, was selected. Montezuma met all the requirements needed for a release site. Food would be plentiful in the 10,000-acre wetland complex where marsh, rivers, and open water were prevalent. The presence of a wide variety of water birds and fish guaranteed its food potential for young bald eagles as well as adults returning later to breed. Protection of the young eaglets was paramount, so the release site had to be able to be cordoned off and made inaccessible to the public. Clark's Ridge, a hilltop overlooking Shockey Pool, the largest water body in the marsh, was hidden amidst a labyrinth of roads that traversed farmland around the refuge, making it impossible to locate it. Luckily, this was before the days of GPS and Google Maps. It was important the site be near Cornell so the peregrine team could be available in case I needed them for emergencies. The drive from Ithaca to the refuge took less than an hour. Bald eagles prefer to nest in tall trees with strong branches, which the young use as practice perches when they're learning to fly. Nests are often built in the V formed by these branches. The adults like to be able to see around them, so height and being on the edge of the forest is important. Montezuma had many hardwoods surrounding the wetland areas, perfect for future nests. Once the site was chosen, the next dilemma was finding a source for young eaglets that could be transported to New York. Because there was no sustainable population left in any of the surrounding states, it would be necessary to go further afield to find an area where DDT hadn't yet left its mark. Alaska had plenty of bald eagles, but the genetic makeup of this much larger subspecies was thought to be too different to take a chance on. Instead, the program looked to the Midwest, particularly the Great Lakes states of Wisconsin, Michigan, and Minnesota, where DDT hadn't been used as it had in the Northeast, and where a healthy population of bald eagles could be found. Bald eagles generally lay 3 eggs and try to rear 3 young. However, because of food supply and energy expenditure, often the third eaglet is smaller and weaker than its siblings and doesn't make it. They are either thrown from the nest or pushed aside by the stronger ones until they starve. That was the case with this particular nest that you're seeing here. Therefore, the plan was to select the third eaglet from these 3-bird nests for transport. When the climbers scaled the nest trees to band the young eaglets at about 7 weeks of age, it was up to them to determine which birds to remove. The position of the nest refuge was critical. Not only did it have to be hidden from the public, it had to be high enough for the young birds to survey the land around them, near tall trees they could use as perches once they started to fly, and most of all near the water. Clark's Ridge met all these criteria. The local electric company donated and installed 4 35-foot-high poles for the tower, on top of which we constructed a 7-foot platform. My peregrine team colleagues, Jim Weaver and Willard Heck, and I had to think like eagle parents and build a nest for them closely resembling the nest where they were born. The next step was to create a canvas blind or hide next to the platform so I could observe and feed the birds without them seeing me. The blind was barely large enough for me to sit in cross-legged. On the side facing the nest was a hole through which I could feed the young eagles using a long barbecue fork without having them see me so they wouldn't view humans as their providers or food source, a dangerous situation for both species. At first, I had to climb to the platform using metal pegs, like those used by electric linemen. But once the scaffolding was up, my ascent became far easier and a bit less scary. We wrapped aluminum predator guards around the poles to prevent animals like raccoons from reaching the vulnerable young birds. The day finally came on June 18, 1976, when Wisconsin Fish and Wildlife climbers called to say they had 2 eaglets ready to ship to New York. Arriving at Syracuse Airport in 2 separate crates, the birds, known as W1 and W2, W for Wisconsin, 1 for the female and 2 for the male, were retrieved by federal officials and driven to the refuge an hour away. On hand to receive the eaglets was a large contingent of state, federal, and refuge people, a few biologists from Cornell, Tom Cade, me, and my 2 dogs, Max and Moses. While most of the entourage stood at the base of the tower looking up, Dr. Cade tied the ropes around the crates, Jim Weaver hauled them up to the top of the platform, and Dr. Cade and I then pried open the tops and released them. The eaglets had been shrieking while in the crates with their call-like cry until they were able to jump onto their new nest and seek shelter in the corner of the platform, as far away from their captors as possible. These weren't cuddly, tame birds who wanted to be friends, and for this we were all grateful. They had to have a healthy fear of humans if they were to survive. After the eaglets settled down and the crowd dispersed, I was left alone on the hillside with my dogs, wondering how on earth the eagles and I were going to survive the next 3 months. The first order of business was to set up my campsite, including my tent, my camp stove, and all the paraphernalia required for the eagles. If I look a bit perplexed and panicked in the right-hand photo, it is because I was. To observe the eagles, even when I wasn't up in the blind, I had a remote video camera with a monitor in the tent. The picture was a bit fuzzy by modern standards, but at least I could see they were okay. Many of you have experienced more advanced technology, especially if you have tuned into any of the eagle cams across the country or to Big Bear Valley, California, where thousands of viewers focused on the pair, Jackie and Shadow, hatching eggs after 2 years of failure. Often these images are so clear you feel you are in the nest with the birds. That was not the case in 1976. The next order of business was to feed the young birds. The marshes were teeming with carp, but I had to catch them and stockpile them so that they would be available for 2 meals a day. In the first year, fish were plentiful and I trapped them in a spillway. Then I moved them to a large cage in the water where I could net them whenever I needed to. In the next year, however, a severe drought decimated the carp, and I had to make friends and enlist the help of local fishermen to restock my supply. Eagles are opportunistic feeders, so although fish is a mainstay of their diet, they also eat small mammals and water birds, as well as scavenge for carrion. To give them a balanced diet and introduce them to the varied prey items that awaited them in the real world, I had to find roadkill. I spent hours driving the roads around the refuge, picking up rabbits, squirrels, muskrats, woodchucks, snakes, and other tasty morsels. By the way, rabbits were the food of choice. I knew we had to be able to track the eaglets when they left the nest, so banding and equipping them with radios became the next step before they fledged. Surveillance methods, especially for eagles, were in their infancy in 1976, so everything we did was trial and error. With Jim Weaver's help and experience and lots of experimenting, we eventually worked out how to attach a short-term radio to the eagles and to put colored tags on their wings that could withstand the weather but still be seen from a distance. Because of their dependence on flight for hunting and migration, it was essential to ensure these apparatuses didn't interfere with their wing movement. We had to modify things a lot between 1976 and 1977 as we were able to see what worked best. My issue was going to be restraining the eagles, especially when I had to handle them alone, which was quite often. For this, I experimented with several body wraps, but what worked best in the end, believe it or not, was my blue jeans. I cut off the leg, and its tapering shape was like a straitjacket, a perfect fit for an eagle. He couldn't move his wings, and with his talons wrapped with electrical tape and his beak unable to reach my hands, he was safe and secure, as was I. After spending my days watching and recording the eaglet's behavior from the blind, I noticed a significant increase in their energy level. Increasingly more restless and energetic, they began hopping all over the platform, flapping their wings as they practiced their pre-flight maneuvers, and even banging their heads on the top of the enclosure as they gained altitude. It was finally time to remove the bars before they hurt themselves and let them out on the perch we had nailed to the tower. Before long, they made their first flight. I had little time to celebrate as they spread their wings for the first time. Like all young creatures, first steps, or in this case flights, are a bit shaky. An eagle's size works against it when first taking off, so it looks like an out-of-control helicopter as it struggles to find a landing place. This usually was into the marsh below the hillside, its thick cattail stands interspersed with small pools of water. Without wind to help with lift, the young eagles couldn't become elevated, so became stuck. If they had had parents, they would have fed them on the ground and watched over them until their wings were stronger. But it was up to me to find them, catch them, and return them to the nest on top of the tower for a second try. Hauling a struggling eagle under one arm while gripping the ladder with the other was never an easy task. Eventually, they grew stronger and were able to reach a perch either on one of the trees near the tower or the dead snags in the marsh. The 1976 eaglets spent a few months exploring the areas inside and outside the refuge, learning how to catch their own food until hunting season in October. Then they left the refuge for good, leaving me to wonder if they would survive all the threats that awaited them in the outside world. Once their radio batteries died after a few weeks, there was no way to follow them, so all I could do was hope. In late winter and spring of 1977, we began to prepare for the next group of eagles. The decision to hack 4 birds had been made. The scaffolding had to be removed so a second nest platform could be built. The blind was placed between the two nests so I could observe and feed both sets of eagles. With the scaffolding gone, I was back to the metal pegs for climbing. Like a mountain goat, I would clamber up to the platform, push aside the plywood door to my blind, and haul myself inside, all while trying not to make any noise that would possibly disturb the birds. In one of these photos, on the left, you can see my blue jean cut-off shorts, whose legs were now in use as the sleeves to restrain the eagles. In 1977, 2 of our eaglets were taken from 3 bird nests, one from Michigan, M1, and one from Minnesota, M2. But we also wanted to use captive bred birds for the first time. Patuxent Wildlife Research Center offered us 2 eaglets raised by eagle parents held in captivity there. There turned out to be a huge difference between the captive bred birds and the wild young, partly because of size and maturity of the caged birds. They'd been fed an unlimited diet at Patuxent, had become used to people, and were feistier and more precocious than the wild birds. They had no desire to be contained behind bars and went out to the perch early after arriving. Sometimes they hopped onto the roof for a better view. The video camera had been moved to a pole next to the nest tower so it could capture both nests and record their activity back to the trailer that had replaced my cozy tent from the previous year. In July, a game of musical chairs was in order. All 4 eaglets were still confined in their nests when I was told I'd be welcoming a new arrival. A 3rd eaglet with a broken leg had been discovered and rescued by the climbers in Michigan when they were securing our eaglet M1. The injured bird, whom I called M3, was sent to the vet college at the University of Minnesota where he was treated and rehabbed. He was now ready to be released and was on his way to me. Since the 2 Patuxent birds and M1, the female from Michigan, were ready to fledge, I opened the bars on one cage so they could come and go. In the other cage, I put M3 in with M2, the male from Minnesota. We will hear about M3 later in this talk, but for now, suffice to say, he was the calmest and most endearing of all the birds that I released. The secrecy surrounding the Eagle Project was well kept during the first year. Everyone was worried about vandalism if the public knew the eagles were on the ridge, and there was a little worry about me being alone with only my 2 dogs for protection in the middle of nowhere. There was also uncertainty about whether the program would succeed, and the government folks didn't want it advertised until they were sure the eagles had at least survived long enough to leave the refuge. In 1977, such secrecy was abandoned, and I was besieged by media, anxious for a juicy story. Reporters would come for an interview armed with cameras, and I would find a simple snapshot used to lure readers to a front-page article in the New York Times about the birds and their young female caretaker. My camera-shy nature was not well suited to this new role I found myself in. Some of the notoriety was welcome, however. In the fall of 1977, I was invited to attend the New York State Fair in Syracuse to be inducted into the Iroquois Confederacy as an honorary member of the Iroquois Nation. Although I was nervous about going, it was a memory I will savor forever. I spent the day with members of the 6 nations of the Iroquois. I learned about their customs and culture and was lavished with handmade gifts from each group, including a sacred eagle feather that I have to this day. Apparently, I was the first female to receive such an honor, allowing the wives of the chiefs to be part of the event, an historic moment for them as well. After the eagles left the refuge in the fall of 1977, my tenure as the eagle caretaker was over. Although I never saw these eagles catch their own food, they seemed to be independent and stopped coming to the tower for the fish that I had left them, a sure sign they had a better option for themselves. I returned to Ithaca and completed my thesis, which became the manual on hacking bald eagles. By the 1980s, 9 other states had adopted our hacking procedures and were releasing eagles. The last state to do so was Tennessee, which hacked birds until 2020, exceeding even New York's total of 198. New York continued to hack eagles in Montezuma from 78 to 81, deciding eventually to move the project to other sites in the state to allow for breeding birds to return to their natal area without becoming overcrowded. As it turned out, eagles aren't as averse to nesting near each other as we'd previously thought, as long as there is an ample food supply, which explains today's existence of 28 active nests within a 25-mile radius of Montezuma. As the hacking projects increased, the states had to reach further afield to find healthy eagles for transport. While New York was using Alaskan birds by then, deciding that the genetic differences wouldn't be a problem after all, other states like Pennsylvania and New Jersey connected with Saskatchewan and other Canadian provinces. Massachusetts brought in eaglets from Cape Breton, Nova Scotia, Manitoba, and Michigan. This cross-border cooperation between our two countries allowed many eagles to return to the skies of the northeastern U.S. Looking at New England and New York, we can see the dramatic increase in breeding eagle pairs since 1967, when DDT was still a threat. Only Maine had breeding pairs and just 21 at the time. By 2023, Maine still won the prize with over 800 pairs, with New York a close second with 426. Circling back to Montezuma for a minute and the 7 eaglets I had raised back in 76 and 77. My Wisconsin eaglets, W1 and W2, turned out to be siblings taken from the same nest. Their bond never wavered after they left the refuge, and they went on to mate and nest near Watertown, a couple of hours away, raising 1 eaglet in 1980. But the most exciting news was that of M3, the rehabbed eagle from Michigan. I had lost track of him along with the other eagles from that year, and could only hope that he had survived. In June 2015, I received a press release from the DEC of New York that his body had been recovered, the victim of a vehicle hit. He had a band on his leg that identified him as one of my 1977 eagles. He was 38 years old, the oldest wild eagle ever known, and had been nesting at Hemlock Lake, the last remaining eagle nest when the project was begun. Breeding for 35 years with 2 different mates, he could have produced as many as 70 eaglets during his lifetime. I was indeed a proud mama. New York's goal was to put 10 breeding pairs. Oops. I don't know what's happening. Okay. For some reason, my slides aren't advancing, so I'm not sure why.
Tina, do you need to go back, close out and start over again maybe and go to the next slide?
Yeah, I guess I do. I've never had this happen before. Yeah, I would probably have to do that. I'm sorry about that.
No problem.
But for some reason, neither the remote nor the computer is advancing the slide. So I will go back. Sorry about that. I'll stop the sharing and try it again. Okay.
As a last resort, you could also try emailing it to me and I could share my screen. Just let me know if there's any way I can help.
Okay. Well, let me just try this again.
Okay.
Some reason it's
Or you can pretend we're the Cape Cod Bird Club and try that one.
okay. Let's see what happens now. Okay, seems to be working so far. Okay, let's hope for the best. Okay, this was where I was, so we'll hope for the best. New York's goal was to put 10 breeding pairs back into the skies. These maps of nesting territories every 10 years show how successful eagles became at surpassing this goal. Today in the continental U.S., eagles are most numerous in the Midwest and along the Atlantic Flyway. Minnesota has the second largest population, Florida the third, next to Alaska. Alaska boasts about half of the total bald eagle breeding population. The timeline of the bald eagle's recovery is defined by several key pieces of legislation and moments in the U.S. history of conservation, beginning in 1940 with the Bald Eagle Protection Act. By 2007, the eagle had recovered enough to be removed from the endangered species list, although states like Tennessee were still hacking them back to the wild for 13 more years. After 1977, I never returned to Montezuma, although I passed it on the thruway and always craned my neck searching for the tower on Clark's Ridge. I followed the news about the hacked eagles as much as I could, but once Dr. Cade moved the Peregrine Fund to Boise, Idaho, and merged it with the World Center for Birds of Prey, my source of information was gone. In 2019, Tom Cade died, and by 2020, I felt the story about the origins of this project needed to be told. I knew this meant returning to the marshes to see the eagles again. In November of 2022, my husband and I were shocked when we drove into the refuge. When I had left almost 45 years before, there were no nesting eagles and little sign that the species would become the signature species of the refuge. Now we passed many images of eagles welcoming visitors. After I convinced the current refuge staff that I had been the one to start the Eagle Project, thanks to the expertise of the Cornell Peregrine Fund and Tom Cade, I was given the keys to the city, or the refuge as it were. I was shown the giant sculpture designed by Jay Seaman for the 40th anniversary of the Reintroduction program that sits on the edge of the refuge adjacent to the New York Thruway. Those of you who drive that road can find it, whether you're going east or west. It's huge and incredibly formidable. Accompanied by our Montezuma guides, we bushwhacked our way up to Clark's Ridge, long overgrown, but still the home of the nest tower, albeit a bit bedraggled all these years later. Even the box holding the video camera was still intact. I went down memory lane with my patient listeners as they heard about the project, the start of the eagle recovery, and the role Cornell had played in its design. Today, 7 bald eagle nests are active in the refuge, with 14 more in the wetlands complex surrounding the boundaries. Some pairs even build 2 nests, perhaps as insurance against disaster, but I like to think they're so secure and comfortable, they want a winter and a summer house. Our story has spread throughout central New York as school children have learned about the origins of the eagles they see every day. The Wayne Elementary School near Montezuma designed this mural last month to commemorate the project and hang in the refuge visitor center as a permanent exhibit. The day they arrived with the mural, the students were escorted to Clark's Ridge, where they paid their respects to the tower, even more overgrown than when I last saw it, that launched the eaglets who started it all. As we stood on the dike road that runs along Shockey Pool, where I had once rescued so many youngsters from the cattails, adult and immature eagles were flying all around us. I would like to share for a minute what was racing through my mind at this time by reading a short passage from the book about this experience. Several eagles fly over my head towards a group of red maples hugging the inner tributary. Adults land on tree limbs overhanging the dike road, while the immatures, 6 altogether, with their uniforms of chocolate brown from head to toe, perch like preschoolers in one of 2 adjacent trees. I want to call the class to order, to watch and listen and tell them where they have come from and what it means for them to be here on this day. I want to tell them about their grandparents, those stalwart 7 eagles, and the others who followed them, whose resilience and persistence paved the way for their return to this refuge nearly 50 years ago. I want to stand them there, alone with my birds, until they can grasp their own significance. The water is high, the current swift. It would be impossible to cross to the field of cattails in the distance without a boat. It would be at least chest high and require waders to navigate it. But I know it is possible. In this massive vegetation interspersed with standing pools of water, invisible from the outside world, had once been 7 hapless eaglets, each rescued from certain disaster by a young researcher, so desperate to reach her quarry she didn't notice how deep the water was, how thick the grasses were, how many times she'd fall into the cavities below her. As I begin to question my memories, seeking clarification at every step of my mind travel, I look up at the hillside. Nothing but trees can be seen from down here on the dike road, but wait, there is a shadow behind the tallest ones, a bare silhouette of telephone poles, straighter and darker than trees. Something is there, but I can't be sure. Although my heart is gladdened by the sight of so many bald eagles today, I know that their success in increased numbers haven't been without criticism. Many people don't like having predators in their world or don't understand that an ecosystem is most healthy when every trophic level is full and balanced. An apex predator like a bald eagle can have enemies among humans who find it hard to watch him take a fish from an osprey or attack its chicks or take over its platform, or harass loons or herons who are nesting in their lake. Making room for all species is not something we humans do easily. Instead, we pick sides and often the underdog becomes our cause. We have forgotten that almost 50 years ago, the bald eagle was the underdog, and only with our help and vigilance was saved from extinction. I hope we can learn to champion his comeback, to be tolerant when he behaves according to his true nature, and to ensure the threats that still exist in his world are mitigated so as not to repeat the damage of DDT. And there are significant threats to the eagle we have to be concerned about. Lead poisoning results from lead shot used by hunters that drops into the mud of streams, lakes, and rivers, or is inside the carcasses of waterfowl or deer. Lead fragments are in the gut piles the hunters leave behind to lighten their load as they leave the hunting area. It can also come from lead sinkers used in fishing. Lead wreaks havoc on an eagle's nervous and digestive systems, causing him to lose weight and eventually die. Shooting continues to be an issue, as do vehicle deaths. M3 was testament to this. Eagles are scavengers, so a roadkill or carcass on train tracks are too enticing for a hungry eagle who will arrive to eat dinner and be hit. AVM, or avian vacuolar myelinopathy, is caused by a toxin in cyanobacteria, blue-green algae, that transfers to eagles through water birds like coots. Wind farms, although a positive resource to counter our use of fossil fuels, can also take out eagles, especially when built near their nesting sites. Immatures, as we have learned, aren't coordinated enough to avoid the giant blades when learning to fly. Other threats like rodenticides, especially eschars, second-generation anticoagulant rodenticides, used by homeowners, businesses, and farmers, are lethal to eagles who ingest the targeted rodents, unwittingly looking for an easy meal. The more insidious threats of habitat loss, which often reduces nest sites by logging or thinning of tall trees, or development of lake shores and rivers, and of course, climate change, which affects the food supply the eagle depends on. And our latest and perhaps most serious worry, avian flu, which has taken its toll on many eagles, especially in coastal states like Georgia and Florida, where eagles eat water birds infected with the disease, but also in former eagle strongholds like Michigan and Minnesota. It is believed that this virus killed 600 eagles in 45 states in the last few years. Migrating flocks of snow geese usually winter along the Atlantic coast from New Jersey to South Carolina. On their way south from their breeding grounds in Canada and Greenland, they follow the Atlantic flyway down the Connecticut River Valley, then along the Hudson River in New York, and through New Jersey and Pennsylvania on their way south. Last winter, thousands of snow geese succumbed to the virus in eastern Pennsylvania, and at least 1,000 were found dead in New York. Alarmingly, snow geese are a favorite prey item of bald eagles. This bird is too majestic to be ignored again, but as we have seen with many less charismatic birds, if we take our eye off the ball, we lose the brilliant biodiversity we need to make our planet survive. The Bald Eagle Project was a success, its recovery extraordinary, and the lessons we have learned should be enduring. We humans owe a debt to the natural world around us. We need to respect it, conserve it, and be mindful of its future. I hope you can read Return to the Sky if you haven't already done so, but most important, that you are able to enjoy the many bald eagles who have made New York their home. Today, we can revel in the numbers of wintering birds who visit the Bronx and Hudson rivers and unfrozen areas along Long Island's South Shore, as well as the many nests that can be spotted throughout the state during their breeding season. I thank you all for listening tonight, and in case you are interested in purchasing the book, which I hope you are, here are places that you can go. And now I would be happy to try to answer any questions you may have. I guess if you put them in the chat, then Leslie will be able to read them from there. Thank you very much.
Wow, Tina, thank you so much. I am truly moved by this story, every last bit of it. This is absolutely unbelievable. And the fact that you were taking those third eaglets from the nests and every last bit of it, the small group of you that made such a big difference for the country. Absolutely incredible. And thank you for the work that you did and are still doing. Does anyone have a question they want to try speaking and see if Tina's able to hear your question? Otherwise, I'll read them off of the chat. We have a comment from Lori, says, thank you so much for the wonderful work you did. Have enjoyed seeing so many of these amazing birds along the Croton Reservoir and Hudson River over the past 40 years. Thanks in no small part due to you and your team. Absolutely. By the way, Doug and I were both at the NYSOA meeting this fall, where I went to the Montezuma Wildlife Refuge for the first time and had been wanting to go there for years.
Oh, great.
And I also went to Cornell and can visualize what you're saying and the pools there. And oh my goodness, another comment from Laura Taylor. So amazing to hear the story. Previous comment was from Lori Lechthaler. Alice Pernick says, very inspiring, gives us hope for all birds at risk. So true.
Hey, I just want to say something. Tina, I don't have a question, but I just want to thank you for all the great work you did over the course of your life. And this was such a great presentation. Really, my wife and I were just moved by the whole thing. And so it was nice to see somebody back in the 70s, those pictures. That was really nice to see also. So, anyway, thank you again. This was bravo, bravo. I mean that.
Yes, truly from the heart. I'm wondering if you still have the genes. I doubt it. But
I don't have the genes, no, just the eagle feather. I don't think I could have gotten into the genes right now.
We saw, I wish I still had my genes from the 70s. We saw the huge eagle sculpture there at Montezuma, of course. And I know when my daughter and I first started birding, we waited a long time before we could finally see a bald eagle. It was a few years. And we finally saw our first one in the Bronx, and we were surprised to see it here. And even now they're becoming more common in our area anyway. And we have you all to thank for that.
Tina, just a question. When you were at the lab at Cornell, was it just the little red building against the lake?
No, it wasn't a red building. It was built basically cinder blocks. It was white and yeah, very small. And the offices were tiny of all the researchers in there. The sound lab hadn't been discovered yet. That came after I left. It was a completely, if you have been to the lab of ornithology recently, you would never have known that.
Oh, I know. But when the first time I ever went up to Cornell lab, it was a red wooden building right at the edge of the water.
Oh, no, they moved it. They definitely moved it away from the lake. That's very interesting, Doug. I didn't even know that. I didn't know that that's where it had started. No, they moved it back up to Sapsucker Woods Road where it is now, but it was just a tiny little building. And the hawk barn, or where all the peregrines were bred, was right across the street. So they were right down there. Now the hawk barn is completely gone. And of course, the lab is quite a structure. Very fancy.
I know. We were just there for
We were just there.
Leslie and I were just there for the NYSOA meeting.
And I know from my daughter, they're doing a lot of great raptor work there currently. Bruce, Bryce, and their whole raptor program sounds great.
Yes, they
Uh,
are. They're doing a lot of great research there.
It's
and
probably, Tina, it's probably about 50 years since the first time I went up to the lab.
Yeah. Okay. Well, this all
Maybe
happened
more.
50 years ago. 1976 was when I did the project. So the lab must have been moved before that, because I knew was up where it is now. And it was just a cinder block structure.
It was probably in the 60s
Yeah, that makes sense. The 60s.
when
Yeah.
I was first there, and it was just a red building with a window looking out into the lake.
Oh my gosh. Well, I've never heard that before. That's really interesting, Doug.
I
Wow.
heard the origin story. The lab was basically a sign on someone's door. I forget the person. A professor stuck a sign on his door. This is now the lab of ornithology, and that's how it started for real. There was an article in maybe Smithsonian or somewhere about this. A few more comments in the chat, by the way. One from Sarah Bear. Thanks so much. Very enlightening. I was moved as well. Thank you for your lifelong service. And Jane Lawrence says, I hung on every word. Thank you. Gail Doolin, thank you. Such a superb presentation of an incredible project that's had a massive impact. And by the way, I didn't know the bald eagle was not our official bird either. So I guess there was another chance to go with the turkey, but I'm glad it worked
No,
out.
I don't think he was going to get bounced off his pedestal.
I don't think so. Um,
No.
But by the way, the Lab of Ornithology was closed for about a year for renovations right after my daughter transferred from UMass to study ornithology. And she gets there and the place is closed for a year. But
Oh, yeah, that must have been very, very depressing.
that was tough. But
I had to give a talk at the lab last May, and I was just blown away by the changes that had been made, but also by the history that had been lost about former ornithologists that had worked there. And it's interesting how fast that can happen, that people forget so quickly what was done before they came. So I hope that, they're going to work on that and get more information about what had happened before.
I had similar feelings. I felt like they had done such an incredible job of redoing it, but also a few things were lost in the process that
Yeah,
should not have.
yeah,
So I totally hear that. We have a
right.
comment from Lynn Teplin. Thank you so much. It's an honor to hear the story from the person who actually accomplished the reintroduction of eagles to New York. This should be, is there a television show or documentary about this in the works? I feel like this story belongs in some very public venue. Well, I know the book, and so I presume that people are noticing your book and
Yeah, no, I haven't heard
um,
anything about a documentary, but
I think that would
never
be
know.
great.
These,
But you're obviously getting the word out, and I encourage you all to check out Tina's book. There is the info there. And does anyone have any further comments or questions?
Tina, just so you, on the Christmas bird count for Bronx Westchester,
uh-huh.
we had 5 eagles on the ice locally.
Yes,
Oh,
after
that's
after
great.
you left, Gail. Sorry to say that I missed other stuff we saw there too because I was in the car. But yeah, there at Winged Foot, a bunch of bald eagles dining on a carcass and
Yeah,
other
there were
stuff in
2 adults, 1 subadult, and 2 juveniles
Oh, that's great.
eating something on the ice.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's wonderful to hear. Yeah, I heard the other day that somebody was out there on the edge of the beach. There was a white-winged scoter that was just floating along, minding its own business, and right in front of him came this eagle who scooped up the
Oh,
scoter and carried it off.
oh
So
my
much
gosh.
for that lovely birding experience. Although he felt like he'd really seen a lot by being able to see that performance. So they're definitely out there. I think people are beginning to get a little concerned about the nesting numbers, and so it's very important to keep counting the the nests every summer. Make sure that they're staying the same or increasing, because it doesn't take much to all of a sudden have a decline in the nests, and that's been happening in Maine and in New Jersey. So I don't know about New York. of whether it's true here. I know in Mount Montezuma it's not, but in other places I don't know.
Mhm.
There's supposed to be 3 or 4 nests, I believe, in Lower Westchester.
Okay.
And then there's the one at Eagle Fest, the one that they build that a person dressed in a giant eagle costume sits in.
Right. Yeah.
Let's not forget that. Well, I think with the Revolutionary War 250 celebrations on the horizon, maybe there will be even more opportunities to tie in PR about this issue, perhaps. So thanks again so much. Truly moved, and I'm definitely going to check out the book. I'm sorry I don't already own it, and thank you all for spending part of your evening with us. Hope to see some of you at Jones Beach or Montauk or the Sean Gunks our Eagle Walk, Eagle Fest, and other speaker programs. Next month we have a geneticist Ricky Flamio talking about species splitting and lumping. Please check out our programs page of our website for all our upcoming programs, green infrastructure, shorebirds. We have a great lineup this year. And don't forget about our seed sale. And we now have a dedicated seed sale page on our website where you can find the order form. So great to see you, and take care, everyone. And thanks again. Have a great evening.
And thank you,
Thank you,
Tina.
everybody. Thank you for having me.
Thank
Thank you.
so much. Wonderful presentation.